It's the truck that I grew up in. First time I was in it, I didn't realize I was in it because my dad would take me in it when I was in diapers. A gentleman from out in Rossalt, South Dakota told me that the first time he met me, my dad changed my diaper on his counter. So that was my first travels in the truck, but I did spend a lot of time going to South Dakota and North Dakota with my dad, picking up grain, delivering shingles and kegs of tar. So the most memorable trip I can remember is going to Badger in Iroquois, South Dakota, and we had to unload shingles through the window on a house because they didn't have modern facilities, so they would use old houses to store shingles. So I went out there and we put shingles through the windows, and they didn't have forklifts, so we had to turn the kegs of tar on the side, and I was obviously small, but would kind of try to help as best I could. And we would roll them off onto like a tire on the ground. So that's how I spent a lot of my childhood. It was just always really special going with Dad in the evening hours when it would get dark in the fall or early winter. And it was warm in the cab and So anyway, we'd do a lot of picking up of grain across North and South Dakota, western Minnesota. And then once in a while, especially like on MEA week, I'd have an opportunity to go with them down to the Twin Cities and go to the grain lines and dump at like GTA, Elevator 1 and 2, and Elevator D. And another good memory of mine is going with them, and then we would pull into like Elevator D, which is kind of an interesting dump. It had a dump so that it would lift the whole truck, and because they'd use flatbed trailers. And I remember one time we pulled down in there, and my dad's buddy, who we sold the truck to, was actually up on the dump. So there we pull in, and the truck's sitting, you're talking probably 50 feet up in the air, dumping the grain out. And then we would wait in line and then until it was our turn, and then we'd pull up on the scale and we'd have to exit the truck. Well, the truck would go up in the air and the grain would all dump in the elevator. So, but one thing I did remember about that too is you would spend 4 to 6 hours waiting to get on the end of the dump. There was that many, the trucks were just lined up on the street back in those days. So probably a little different than some of the stuff today. But then we would go over and load at GAF shingles, and we'd have to lay the sides all down. Or I should say, actually, we would take the sides off and store them underneath the trailer, and then load shingles, and then tarp them, and then we'd head back home. But just spent a lot of time, what I did a lot of time is when he'd come home, was just shining all the chrome, the aluminum. And another thing that was a real favorite for me is when I was young is just we'd know that Dad was going to be coming home, and then we would hear the truck come. It was always just a lot of fun to, when Dad would come home, he would a lot of times have lumber on. And then it was just fun to see him because we probably hadn't seen him for 10 days. But the best part about it was the stories he had. He had stories from going out west and just some of the greatest places to eat. He always talked about the diner out in Montana, and it was made out of an old railroad boxcar. But he said they had the best steaks that he'd ever eaten and very inexpensive. So he always delighted in an opportunity when he had this stop at the diner in Montana. And he was one of the first ones that delivered items up to the Big Sky, Montana resort. And I remember him always talking about having to chain up in the summer. They wouldn't let him go up there until he chained up. So he had to chain up to make the delivery of the products for the ski chalet. So he had some of the first deliveries up to Big Sky, Montana. And then back in the day, he traversed a lot of Montana without the interstate, and the interstate was being built. So he'd get on stretches of interstate, and then he would end up on 2-lane and have to work around the different passes and stuff without major interstates. He also had a time where he's delivering in Idaho, and or I should say, I think he picked up in Idaho, and he climbed up the mountain to get up there to get loaded. And I remember him saying that he'd asked the guy, "Is there another way out of here?" And the guy said, "Nope." So he had to go right back down. How he got up in there. So just a lot of interesting stories that he's had over the years, just sharing about West, being out in the West. He went down to the cities and saw this truck, and if I remember the story right, he told the guy he would purchase it, and I think that was the biggest purchase he had done without asking Grandma if he could do. So came home and said he had a truck. Well, the truck's been in our family a long time. Dad bought it in 1968 and ran it till about 81, and put a lot of miles all across the U.S. And then he sold it to one of his best friends, and then he ran it, and then my dad ended up driving it for him, and we actually repainted it in 1987 to a green color, and then it was sold in about 1991 to another friend who was running and operating it until 2003 when we purchased it back. And then we had it for about 5 years, and then we restored it back to its original color and paint scheme. The paint scheme was original. Dad just changed the color. The red here was white around this scheme. In 1976 we had repainted it, and then at that point we'd changed this to red and then added this stripe down here around the fender well. And then now since we have had it at shows, the Big Iron Classic Truck Showdown in Casson. We've been up at Moonshine Madness in Osakis, been at Bruton Bonanza Valley Days with it, been in parades in Prenzburg, Minnesota, and just had it on display here at the shop for others to see and enjoy as well. One feature this truck does have is it does have a very small 36-inch sleeper on it, which most people probably wouldn't sleep in today. It was called a coffin bunk on it, is what it's called. So this truck is all original. It does have the original hood, cab, sleeper, frame rails. The only thing that's new on it is the air cleaners, the mirrors, some of the accessory parts, the mufflers, the things that wear out. It has almost 4 million miles on it. One other thing that's interesting is this is the original bumper on this truck. With a truck that's almost 60 years old, I bet you there's not another one around that says it has the original bumper on it. Dad had traveled all those years without a radio, without an air conditioning. I think he just sang and hummed and whistled a lot of songs to himself. He did have an 8-track tape player in it in the early 70s, but in about 72 or early 73, somebody decided to go in the truck one evening, and they went right past his nice CB radio, which if they would have been smart, they would have stole that, but they went past that and they stole the 8-track player off of underneath the dash. And then I don't think he ever had music in it again other than that. This unit also does have 2 stick shifts. It's a 2-sticker, which today most are a single stick or no stick automatics. So it's an old man's truck. Also in my hands here I have logbooks that are probably becoming a little bit archaic in the fact that nowadays we just use a phone or a tablet, and this just shows your log, your duty, hours of duty status, and then Dad would simply roll them alternate directions so that you could see where he was, his hours of service and his pre-trip inspections and so forth, where he was headed and what he was hauling, which is something that is not commonly used today. It can be used, but most of the time nowadays it's all done electronically. I also have an atlas here that the dad had in the truck and used. It's from 1968, and it's just kind of fun to look at and just see. If you look at the different states, especially like Minnesota where we're from, that a lot of the interstates were under development, weren't actually in place. So that's kind of one of the things that's interesting about that, in how the development of our road system with all the nice roads we have today. The future for the truck, I think, is just to have here and to be able to take out and to show people the development of the truck industry, but yet also how similar they still do look compared to some of the ones we do have. But there has been a lot of developments, especially in suspension ride and engines and transmissions, and especially in creature comforts with the cabs, with all the amenities we have in the cabs today. But my desire would be is just to be able to show my grandkids and their grandchildren what Grandpa used and how they moved America back 60 years ago.